Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's program, presented in partnership with the Mental Health America of the Central Carolinas organization and the Charlotte Mecklenburg Public Library. The first hour of today's program, the presentation portion for maintaining your mental wellness during the pandemic, will be recorded and made available to the public for future reference. The second portion of the program, which will include the last 30 minutes, will be an open question and answer session that will not be recorded for privacy purposes. My name is Tanya Lewis, and I am an adult services librarian at the Sugar Creek branch of the library, and I will be your host this evening. It is my honor to introduce our amazing guest speaker today, Ericka Ellis-Stewart. Since 2015, Ericka has worked for Mental Health America of Central Carolinas, a local nonprofit promoting mental health through advocacy, education, and prevention. Ericka currently serves as the MHA's Director of Education and Advocacy. She is also the recipient of the 2019 Mental Health Advocate of the Year, awarded by the Black Mental Health Symposium. Ericka is a nationally certified mental health first aid trainer. She is also certified to teach the QPR, Question, Persuade, and Refer, suicide prevention curricula to adult and youth populations. Ms. Ellis-Stewart is a master trainer with the QPR Institute in Spokane, Washington. She is currently pursuing a master's degree in health administration and recently received her North Carolina Certified Peer Support Specialist designation from the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tanya, for that warm welcome. And she said, I have to introduce you. So she twisted my arm. I was like, just tell them that lady is here. Welcome, everyone. I'm so glad to see you all tonight. See some friendly faces in the room. I do have quite a bit of information for you all, and we've got a little bit of time, so I'm going to try to get through it as quickly as possible, but as thoroughly as possible, and then allow you all to have some time for questions. Feel free to put questions in the chat, and if I can answer them during my presentation, I will. Or if we need to get to it at the end during the formal Q&A, we'll do that as well. So let's go ahead and start. So obviously 2020 has been not the year that most of us planned. We've been working from home at Mental Health America since March 16th. So that was many, many, many months ago. And I actually had to drop by the office the other day to pick up a package. And it was kind of funny and ironic. I had this picture on my door that I had put up at the start of 2020, and it's two men boxing. And over one man's head, it says you, and he's doing this. And above the other man's head, it says this year. And I was like, that's hilarious. That's not really what happened. I think the year flip-flopped it and punched all of us in the face. So that said, I've had a lot of people requesting different workshops around how to maintain our emotional well-being as we navigate this pandemic of COVID, as we navigate this pandemic of racism and social injustice that we've seen throughout 2020 as well. And now that we're in the holiday seasons, that adds even a different layer of complexity. So that's kind of what's going to be the focus of my presentation today. All right, so let's go ahead and jump in here. Let me get my technology working. Just a bit about Mental Health America. I always have to give a shout out to our organization because we are wonderful. And if I do say so myself, we are the bomb because we offer a ton of programs, and it's really designed to give you the support, the resources, and the knowledge you need to be emotionally healthy, to support someone who is having a mental health challenge or a mental health crisis. I tell people that MHA, Mental Health America of Central Carolinas, we're Switzerland. We're that neutral place where you can get those resources. So when you come to our office, you won't see a psychiatrist, you won't see a social worker, you won't see a therapist. And that's on purpose because we want to be an educator, a convener, an advocate, a resource. And we do that through our various programs. And I'll show you just some of them. We are a small but mighty organization, and we do a lot through our mission of advocacy, education, and prevention. We have a number of programs, Compere, Parent Voice. We do advocacy all across the state of North Carolina on issues that are important to us, whether it's the expansion of telehealth for counseling over the web or over the phone during COVID, whether it's suicide prevention programming, you name it, we probably can provide support for it or help you to get connected. So please reach out to us. I did put my information in the chat. So we know this year has been the year of COVID-19. That has been the overarching headline, in addition to some of the other things that I mentioned, and of course, the 2020 election. We know that in the midst of a pandemic, it's stressful, right? Whether we want it to be, whether we put our head in the sand, whether our hair is on fire and we are running around like a chicken with our head cut off. Being in a pandemic is stressful. And I tell people that, and they're like, of course it is, Ericka, but I say it out loud because sometimes we don't allow ourselves to feel the stress, to feel the fear, to feel the worry. And we kind of do what I call the stuff method, where we stuff it all in. And we're like, nothing's really going on. Nothing's bothering me. I'm good, right? We can't do that in this year because so many things are different and challenging. We know that Corona has caused stress that can allow our worries to create such a negative pattern for us that it can impact not only our physical health, but definitely our emotional and our mental health, our mood. And so what do we do about that? What's really going on? We know that COVID-19 can cause stresses not only for ourselves, but for our loved ones regarding our financial situation and our jobs. We know that many people this year have lost their job. They're furloughed, they have fewer hours. People are losing loved ones or can't get to loved ones because of the quarantining or the stay-at-home orders. We also know that in COVID, people who have mental health and physical health issues, many people are seeing the worsening of some of their chronic health issues. And we need to talk about that so that we make sure that people get connected. I have a friend, she's about my age, and she talked about how she didn't get her mammogram one time this year, and because of COVID, right? Not wanting to go to doctors, to the hospital. And she saw an article, lo and behold, saying women aren't going to get their mammograms. And so she went, and thank God she did, because she has breast cancer. And so now she's getting treated. And so we have to make sure that during COVID, we're paying attention to our health, our mental health and our physical health. What we know that in the pandemic, we're seeing a significant increase in the use of substances. In North Carolina in particular, the Mecklenburg County and the North Carolina ABC board said they have seen such an increase in the purchase of alcohol sales. And so people are at home, some of them drinking alone, some of them drinking over Zoom happy hours, but we know people are using that as a coping mechanism. And we need to talk about that because we don't want people to move into a place of having a substance use issue. The other thing I'm going to talk in depth about is stress and burnout. Stress because many of us are not only working from home, we also may have little kids or other family members that we need to tend to. Our boundaries between work-life balance are blurred. I can tell you for myself, now that I literally walk across the hall from my bedroom into my office, I work like 70 hours, 75 hours a week because my boundaries are a little, I have to drive somewhere to do it. So we have to look at burnout and stress and what's the difference between those two. And then lastly, we want to make sure that we are allowing ourselves to be vulnerable. Right now, again, if we are quarantining, we're maybe not seeing friends and family in person. And so we may feel isolated. We may be doing things to isolate ourselves that we may not recognize unintentionally. And we also have to think about, what are we thinking about? What are the thoughts in our head? And are we allowing negative thoughts to overtake what we're facing and what we're thinking about. Okay. And then lastly, recognizing that conflicts can arise. How many of you have been short with people in your house or at work because you're like, look, I cannot take it another day? I see Miss Marlene, she's like, yes, amen. So we know that that's happening for folks. We know that early in the pandemic, at least 1/3 of the folks in the United States said COVID had a serious impact on their emotional well-being. And that was early in the pandemic. So I would dare say if we did the same survey today, December 15th, we would be well above the 1/3. We'd probably be about 2/3. So let's move forward. If you can, type in the chat. This is our moment of truth. How are you? You can put 1 word, 2 words, just describe how are you in this moment. COVID, holidays, you name it. And I'll give you ladies, and I think there might be a couple of guys on here. Okay. Grateful. Better than yesterday. Amen. Very good. Tired. Amen to that too. Overwhelmed. Yes. Pretty good. Glad to have a roof. Yes. Aimless. Yeah. And all of those things are valid. Up and down emotionally, stressed, but grateful, hopeful. Yeah, we can be all of these things simultaneously or from day to day. Recognizing I need a break. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and for people who live alone, this can be incredibly difficult. I have a girlfriend, she lives alone, and just talking about what that means. And, one day we talked, I said, you need to go outside and get some sunlight. I said, just go to the mailbox. And she said, oh, I hadn't checked the mail in 2 weeks. I said, every day, go check the mail to get some sunlight. That's an order. So thank you all for being transparent and sharing how you're feeling. We have to do that. We have to share because we're humans, and that connection, whether we're introverted or extroverted, is important for our well-being. We were not meant to be isolated creatures. So, talked about stress. There are a couple of different types of stress. Eustress, and I know it's like EU, but eustress is that good stress. It's like, okay, I'm getting ready to have a baby. I'm getting ready to get married. I'm getting ready to move into this dream house, right? Those are good things, but they're stressful, right? You got to get it packed. You got to figure out, what do I feed a baby? Sleep, maternity clothes, all of those types of things. And so there's eustress, where it's in response to a situation that brings mostly positive effects. And then there's distress, where our brain is telling our body that we're perceiving danger, whether real or perceived. And then our body starts to respond. We're either going to get into fight, flight, or freeze mode in the distress. And when that distress signal keeps going for 21 days or more, it can be whatever source of stress. It could be multiple stressors. But when we have those stressors for 21 days or more, the cortisol, all of the things in our body and our brain that say distress move us into chronic stress, which is a place that we do not want to be, because again, it impacts our health and our mental health. Can spike our glucose, can make our mood up, elevated, can make it down. So we need to watch for that. And of course, it can put a personal strain on our relationships and interfere with our ability to work or to do studying or academics, whatever you're doing, and for your children as well. So again, let's talk about stress. We know that between stress and burnout, how many of you use stress and burnout interchangeably? Anybody? You say, I'm stressed, I'm burned out, but it's like the same. They are not the same. So stress is really about physical manifestations. It's about how our body is responding and adjusting to, again, a perceived danger, real or perceived. Burnout is really about an emotional response, okay? It's about a response to chronic emotional and interpersonal stressors. And again, your body, when you're at that burnout or stress mode, our body is going to, again, have that fight, flight, or freeze response, okay? And those things can feel similar, even if you're responding a different way. So again, I want to reiterate stress and burnout. On the left-hand side where you see stress, what you're going to have is maybe an over-engagement. You're overly involved in things. You're like nitpicking everything and anything. You are reactive with your emotions or overreacting. You're making a mountain out of a molehill. Okay. Everything has a sense of urgency. You're hyper active about things. And this is what is going to lead to a loss of energy. You're going to see that it leads to anxiety for you. And again, it's taking a physical toll on your body. You're tired, you're fatigued, all of those things. Burnout, on the other hand, is where you disengage. You pull back. You might be present, but you are disengaged. You're like, I don't care what those people say. Leave me alone, right? I'm over here. Let me do what I'm doing. You might have a blunted or distant emotional state, and you begin to feel a sense of helplessness. Like you're in that hole and you're falling and there's not anything that's going to stop that decline. And then your motivation is going down, diminished. You might feel lonely or depressed. And again, it's that emotional toil. So I tell you that because I don't want you to use those terms interchangeably, because they really mean different things and they're going to show up a different way in terms of how they impact you emotionally and mentally. So let's talk about the holidays. I got my little Santa there. He's looking like it's not going my way. And we know the holidays can take a toll on people, whether it's, the financial stresses, the financial expectations of getting gifts and presents and meals. This year, we can't visit and fellowship the way we want. But for many, it's a reminder of strained relationships with family or loved ones who are no longer with us. And so we have to be well aware of how the holidays impact us and the people around us. So 5 tips that I want to give you all for dealing with what I call the holiday blues. Chill out. Don't overschedule. Don't have over expectations for yourself. Give yourself what I call some margin, where you have a little bit of time to chill, a lot of time to chill, and some self-care, investing in yourself. Take time to hibernate, go to sleep, take a nap, right? Get enough sleep so your body can recuperate. And this is called break out the ice skates, not literally, but really it's just about taking time to have movement and exercise. Maybe if it's just even like a little dance break, you're in the kitchen, you get a little 5-minute, you get the 2-stepping in there, get your heart rate up. Even if it's just that, that's okay. And then the last 2 is like, don't freeze people out. That goes back to the isolation factor. We have to spend time with the people who love and support us, but it may be over Zoom. It may be over FaceTime. It may be they're out in the parking lot and you're standing on the porch, right? I had to do that with my grandmother. She's like, come in the house. I was like, no, ma'am, it's COVID. So, we have to do things a little bit differently. And then lastly, back to what I was talking about with substances and alcohol and how that's being used as a negative coping mechanism. Make sure that we're moderate with our merriment, right? Don't just say it's the holidays and it's, every day we got a little taste of something. We want to have moderation because a lot of times people will say, well, if I get a little drink of wine or beer, it'll help me sleep. Let me tell you something. Alcohol does not help you sleep. It will make you sleepy initially, but it actually disrupts your sleep cycle. So we want to be really careful with that and that notion. All right. So why is this important? We know by the numbers that mental health and mental health issues and diagnoses are extremely common. That said, we don't talk about it. It's a secret. There's a lot of stigma associated with it. People feel labeled. And so we have to get to the point where we talk about mental health in an open way, where we normalize the conversation, just like, Miss Marlene has moved around the screen on me. She's over here now. If Miss Marlene said to Miss Pat, hey, I've got to go to the hospital today. I've got to get my mammogram. I've got to get so-and-so. I've got to get my glucose tested. That would just be a normal everyday conversation. But for most people, they won't say, hey, I cried for 3 hours last night and I don't know why, right? Or, I've noticed I've been wearing the same clothes for 4 days or whatever their manifestation of symptoms are. They're not going to tell people that. When I teach mental health education classes, I tell people that mental health concerns are going to manifest with three sets of symptoms, three types of symptoms: physical, behavioral, and psychological. People are definitely going to tell you about their physical symptoms. My stomach hurts, my head hurts, my back aches, right? Because that's normal. But they're not going to tell you I cried last night. They're not going to tell you I'm not sleeping for days. They're not going to tell you those psychological and other issues. So we have to get to a point where we talk about it because it's common. How common? 1 in 5 of us in any given year. And if we were to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, everybody on this call, 1 in 5 of us would have a diagnosable mental health concern. If it's not you, it's someone you love, a friend or family member. The most common mental health concern is anxiety disorders. And there are many types of anxiety disorders, but overall as a category, over 18% of the US adult population deals with some sort of anxiety disorder, or 2 or 3. We know that over 7% or nearly 7% of the population is dealing with some form of depression. And then we talk about mood disorders, whether that's bipolar disorder or schizophrenia. If you watch television, if you watch Empire or some of the other shows, if someone has a mental health concern, they tell you, oh, that person has bipolar disorder or they're schizophrenic. And people are very surprised to hear that bipolar disorder, less than 3% of adults in the US have that diagnosis. That said, don't let 3% fool you, because that's about 7 million people. Still a lot of people. Okay, and just over 1% dealing with schizophrenia. Okay, so it's common. We need to talk about it. Over 44 million people in our country are living with some sort of mental health concern. All right. So what does that mean? I'm going to talk specifically about depression and anxiety because, again, they're 2 of the most common. And so I want you to have a little bit of how do I recognize it? For both of these diagnoses, it's not that you're having a blue day, a down day, a sad day, but it's really where you're experiencing a set of signs and symptoms. Again, they're physical, they're behavioral, and they're psychological, and they're lasting 2 weeks or longer. Okay, so if you're experiencing some of these symptoms, you may not have all of them, you may have some of them, and this is just a short list. But if for 2 weeks or more you're experiencing this, you want to talk to your doctor, you want to talk to a friend, you want to talk to a mental health professional, I encourage you to do that. So here's what we want to look for. Are you fatigued? Do you have a lack of energy? Okay. Are you seeing changes in your sleep pattern? You're sleeping too much, you're sleeping too little. Same thing with your appetite. You're eating, you're skipping meals, you're overeating. I will be honest with you. I have been eating my feelings, y'all. Ben and Jerry's, gummy bears, cheese puffs, cupcakes. I've been eating my feelings. Y'all pray for me. But anyway, I digress. So watch. Miss Pat is laughing at me. I love that stuff. I can't help it. But if you see these changes in your sleep and your appetite, you want to pay attention to that. If you're withdrawing from others, we know we're isolated, but if you if you have a good friend and you stop calling them because you all talk every day and you haven't talked in weeks, something's different, right? If you have a family member that you've been connected with and you feel yourself pulling back, or they say to you, hey, I haven't heard from you in a while, make sure you're not withdrawing. And then the last couple of things, a loss of interest in your personal appearance. If you're feeling sad, angry, confused, indecisive, helplessness, or if you're having thoughts of suicide or death. And this is something, suicide or death, people are often like, oh, I don't want people to know that. This is, again, another topic that we need to talk openly about. I teach a suicide prevention course, and I'll talk about that towards the end. But we have to know how to recognize the signs and symptoms if someone's having suicidal thoughts or considering killing themselves, okay? So these are just some of the things, and again, 2 weeks or more around depression. So anxiety, again, you see my little guy, he's like, oh. Behavioral, physical, and psychological symptoms, 2 weeks or more. This is where you're having unrealistic or excessive worry and fear to the point that it is disrupting your ability to have relationships, where it's disrupting your ability to work or go to school, where it's disrupting your ability to carry out tasks that you would do on a regular basis, okay? This is where you're constantly worried about if something will or could or should happen to you, your people, your things, your stuff, whatever. It's just like you can't turn it off. Your mind's racing, irritability, on edge, confusion. And again, you begin to avoid people, places, and things, which is in the age of COVID, something that most of us are doing. We're avoiding people, places, and things, but we have to see, is that coupled with some of these other signs and symptoms? And then lastly, the distress that we talked about earlier. I do want to say one thing about anger. People don't realize that anger is often a red flag for depression, anxiety, or someone who's dealt with a trauma. Because again, when we encounter someone who's angry, we often are going to flee, we're going to fight, or we're going to freeze. And when we do that, we miss that there's an underlying sadness that we don't get to talk about and explore with that person. Okay. So we have kind of a little bit of what to look for. What I say on the other side of that, how do we keep ourselves well? Self-care. Self-care is so important. We have to make self-care an ongoing practice. What does that mean? Something we do on a regular basis. If you're on a sports team, if you play football, play volleyball, your coach is like, you got to practice every day. Sometimes your coach is like, we got 2-a-day practices or 3-a-day practices. So your self-care is the same way. You want to practice it. This is what's called the Olga self-wheel, OLGA, self-care wheel. You can Google it. It's really cool because it breaks down self-care into 6 different dimensions: psychological, emotional, spiritual, personal, professional, and physical. There may be things that we haven't realized that we are neglecting in one area of our self-care. It can help us be more intentional, but it can also help us to figure out what are some new tools and tricks and practices that I can put in my tool belt to help keep me emotionally well. And since we got a lot of ladies on here, I'm going to drop the mic on y'all. Listen to me well. Listen. Self-care is not selfish. Okay? Allow yourself to prioritize you above anything else. You have to put the mask on yourself, right? On an airplane, put the mask on yourself before you attempt to save or assist someone else. The other part of this mic drop, getting your hair done and getting your nails done, not self-care. That's beautification. Hair done, nails done. That's beautification. It's not self-care. You probably shouldn't be doing that during COVID anyway. Different conversation. All right. Active listening. Using this as a tool is incredibly important. Listening is a skill. Most of us think we're good at it, but we're really not. We are listening to respond. We are listening from our own perspective. We have to practice listening with our ears and our heart. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, twice the listening, half the talking. And in the age of COVID, as we go into the holidays, we have to hear what people are saying, but also what they're not saying. And active listening is about no judgment, right? It's about leaving our assumptions at the door and really allowing people to be vulnerable and open with us, and to do it in a way that it is not about confrontations or creating a situation where that person is defensive, and you're inviting that person to say more about whatever it is they need to talk about. So active listening as a tool is a gift. So begin to use that. Another wellness strategy is fostering resilience. The human brain is an amazing piece of work. It's like 3 pounds, but it's a powerhouse. And we talk about when there's a negative response, if we can fire that together with a positive response, it really tells our brain, hey, we need to go in this positive direction. So we talk about what we fire together, we wire together. So a way to do that is through resiliency. And resiliency is something we all can do. It's about how we respond, how we bounce back from negative or challenging circumstances. And so some of the important things about resiliency is reframing how we think. It helps to clarify our own purpose and meaning. It helps us to deepen our connection with the people around us. And if we believe in a higher power, to that as well. It allows us to practice positivity, which is incredibly important, moderate our stress, and more importantly, manage our emotions. Many of us have a very difficult time, first and foremost, feeling our emotion and allowing us to feel it, naming the emotion that we feel, and then if it's a little bit out of control, some of us have a challenge managing the emotion. And so resiliency helps with that. And so you're like, Ericka, well, how do I do that? Find 5 to 10 minutes each day to do something creative. Put some structure in your day. Doesn't mean every minute of the day has to be scheduled out. Just simply spend 5 to 10 minutes organizing what is my day going to look like. I like to do it the night before, but the structure, particularly in COVID, many of our days have become structureless. So the more we can do that is helpful. Experimenting, doing something new, and then prioritizing. So these are just some of the ways to build and flex your resilience muscle. All right. So we've talked broadly about some emotional wellness strategies. I'm going to give you my top 10 tools. It's not rocket science, but just to give you a reminder of some things. First and foremost, many times people talk about social distance. How many people have heard we got to socially distance, right? I call it physical distancing because I think when you use the word social distancing, that really encourages people to withdraw from people socially. And so we want to reframe it. So I say physically distance and stay connected with others. So how do we do that? When we stay connected with people, it increases our own sense of happiness, it increases our health, and we live longer. And so some things that we need to do, who are the people in our circle of support? That's your village or your pit crew or your tribe. The people in your tribe, they need to do the following. If they don't do these things, they're out of the tribe, they're out of the village. They need to make you feel comfortable, okay? They give you a sense that you can tell them anything. These, and with your crew, your pit crew, your village, have at least one or two people that you can call at 2 o'clock in the morning, and they will listen to you. They may speak a little bit of French to you when they first answer the phone at 2 o'clock in the morning, but they're going to listen. Okay. These are people that are going to help you solve your problems and not just talk to you about it. And that's not saying they're giving you the answer, but they're empowering you to think through some solutions. They're going to make you feel valued and they're going to take your concerns seriously without minimizing them. So we want to make sure as we stay connected, we have a circle of support that meet this criteria because all of us have people in our lives that drain our energy. And last month was November. I practice a thing called November while I tell people no, the people and places and things that drain my energy. So just practice November, all 12 months of the year. Okay. So tool number two is staying positive. We got to have those good vibes. Even in the face of all the things that are unknown and uncertain and challenging, the worry of our thoughts around the pandemic, around the holidays, again, impact our physical and mental health, oftentimes to an extent that we may not recognize. And so optimism, practicing gratitude, and avoiding negative thoughts. Avoiding negative thoughts is not putting your head in the sand, but it's really having a way to cope so that you can reframe your thinking. When we practice gratitude, people are like, what does that mean? I said, think about keeping a gratitude journal, just a little notebook where you write down one or two things that you're grateful today. It could be, I got to talk to my grandkids on FaceTime. It could be, I got to work on time, whatever it is you're grateful for, and keeping a record of that. Scientific data shows that when we practice gratitude, when we recognize the things that we have to be grateful for, again, it elevates and increases our mood. I have a little glass jar downstairs that a couple of years ago, every day I would put like a little scrap of paper, like a little Post-it note, and I would write just one or two things that I was grateful for. And at the end of that year, I could open that jar up and look back over my year to see What was I grateful for this year? And that makes the things that you were worried about diminished. You can see those things that you have to be grateful for. Tool number 3, we got to get physically active. Now, that could be Zumba on YouTube. It could be a yoga class. It could be a socially distanced walk with a neighbor, a physically distanced walk. But we have to get our bodies moving, because not only is it good for, as my colleague would say, the size of your butt and your waistline, but it really does influence your brain. Just 30 minutes of exercise a day allows your brain to have what I call the happy brain juices, serotonin, dopamine. It tells your brain to release those things. And it also tells your brain to reduce the amount of cortisol, which is the hormone that tells your body, I'm stressed. And so that exercise is important. And if you kind of like me, my treadmill is on the other side of my laptop, and it's in the upright position. So y'all know I haven't been on it yet, but you don't have to do all 30 minutes at one time. If you break it out into a couple of 10-minute dance breaks to get your heart rate up throughout the day, same thing. Again, it's going to reduce your tension and your stress, reduce feelings of anxiety and depression. I will tell you, I am someone with lived experience. I have a mental health condition. And the first thing my mental health practitioners will say, as we talk about signs and symptoms and medication and things, they'll say, are you exercising? And I'll say, does eating cupcakes count? So exercise is incredibly important. All right. And be sure to hydrate. 4, helping people. When we step outside of our own problems, our own perspective, our own reality to help another person, again, it changes our perspective. And there's data out there that talks about when we serve people, when we volunteer, it can increase our feelings of depression and anxiety. It creates a greater sense of calm, fewer aches and pains. And again, it gives you that connectedness to other people. That is incredibly important to us as human beings. Okay. Tool number 5, sleep, and sleep well. I know many of us have sleep challenges. I saw your face, Miss Lewis. Many of us have sleep challenges, and we really need to think about that. And we need to talk to our doctor about it. For many, it may be sleeping too much or too little. We may wake up in the middle of the night or can't go back to sleep. And so we have to ask ourselves, are we getting enough sleep? Is it quality sleep? Is it consistent sleep? When we wake up, do we feel refreshed or do we feel tired? Do we have to have caffeine to get through our day? I was talking to someone earlier today, and they said, my girlfriend, she said, I got some Red Bulls. And I was like, oh no, we got to cut that out. So I said, you need to go for a walk and put that Red Bull away. So we need caffeine and those substances to get through our day. Our quality of sleep and our quantity of sleep is likely not where we need it to be. And then lastly, ask yourself, are you falling asleep when you're sitting in front of the TV, or when you drive, do you get drowsy? Again, if you're experiencing any of these things, there may be something going on with your sleep quality, which again impacts your emotional well-being, your mental health. And when we don't get enough sleep, we literally are taking days, months, and years off of our life because we don't get a chance to refresh our body and our brain. I always tell people when we talk about sleep, what is your sleep hygiene? Sleep hygiene does not mean did you take a shower or a bath before you got to bed. That is not what sleep hygiene is. Sleep hygiene are the rituals and the things that we do to prepare for bed that tells our body and our brain it's time for sleep. How many of you say, I'm going to watch TV until I go to sleep, or I'm going to watch this iPad, or I'm going to scroll through Instagram? I'm terrible at it, but I'm going to tell you don't do it. TV devices, our phones emit that blue light. The blue light is telling our brain it's not time to go to sleep. And so we need to at least, at a minimum, 30 minutes before we intend to go to bed to cut that out. Optimally, an hour or more, but at a minimum, 30 minutes. Also, midnight snackers. I'm talking to myself and to you. If we eat within the 2-hour range before we intend to sleep, that spikes our glucose, which in turn tells our body it's time to be awake. And so we need to think about all of these pieces of sleep hygiene, as well as things like the temperature. Science tells us that we sleep best in a room that's the temperature of 65 to 68 degrees. I know some people would disagree, up cold, get a blanket. But science tells us when we sleep in a room that is that temperature, it helps our brain and our body to do the functions that it needs to rejuvenate us. Okay, so this is really important. Number 6, little Black Girl Magic Joy up here. Create joy and satisfaction in your life. It says pencil in a little pleasure. Pencil in a lot of pleasure. Pleasure is good. We need that joy because those are the things that help us to build the resiliency and to practice resiliency. And again, I've talked about practicing gratitude. You can have a gratitude journal, a gratitude jar. You can have a gratitude accountability partner or do devotionals, whatever works for you. Okay. Strengthen your funny bone. There has never been a truer statement than laughter is the best medicine. When you can get a gut busting laugh, it just tension melts away. Again, it tells the hormones in our body, the bad ones to decrease, the good ones to increase. So laughter is good. And sometimes, yes, indulge in something, not all the time, but on occasion. And then again, keep your eye out for your emotions. We have to scan ourselves every day. How do I feel today? Identify what you're feeling. And if you can, why you're feeling that. If it's up or if it's down, recognize that. And so you know where you are, because if you don't, you won't recognize it until you're at a point of emotional wellness crisis or mental health crisis. And so we want to scan where are we each day? That's incredibly important. Eat the rainbow. We want to eat well, right? Your mom said eat your vegetables. She was right. We want to eat the rainbow, every color that's out there. And, you know, if you're not like, what does that mean? You can check out the choosemyplate.gov. And it really talks about nutritional wellness, has recipes and all kinds of tips about how do you do things like cutting carbs. Overeating carbs sends a message to your brain that's not always great for our emotional well-being. When we're on edge or we're depressed, oftentimes we will crave carbs. And so watch for that, okay? We want to balance that out. We don't want to overeat or diet. And again, moderation on caffeine and alcohol or other substances. Number 8, we have to take care of our spirit. Whether you are a religious person, a person of faith, or someone who is connected to a higher being, whatever that is for you, we need to practice what I call the Holy Trinity of Wellness. The Holy Trinity of Wellness is mind, body, and spirit, right? And there's that connection. If you are a person of prayer, practice that. If you're not, you may have a mantra, or you may have positive statements and sayings that you say to yourself, that you surround yourself with, that really help to put things in perspective for you. Meditating or practicing mindfulness. How many of you do breathing exercises? Those are incredibly helpful, and there are all kinds of breathing activities that, again, help to instantly, in many cases, reduce feelings of anxiety and stress. And they don't take a lot of time. You can kind of sit in your chair and say, I'm going to do this for 3 or 4 minutes. And you do it and you're like, I needed that. Most of us walk around holding our breath. Pay attention to your breath. Are you breathing from your diaphragm? Are you really just holding your breath and kind of like, and you're not really paying attention? You don't know that you're doing it. So pay attention to your breath. It's incredibly important. Get outside. If you can't go to a park or a hike, just walk to the mailbox, walk to the stop sign. Next time, walk, next block. But get outside. It's incredibly important. Journal and figure out a way to connect and do some sort of self-reflection. Okay. Number 9, the struggle is real, y'all. we know that we're in some difficult times right now, and we have to learn how to navigate that effectively. And so I tell people, don't mope, cope. Figure out positive coping mechanisms, because if you allow stress to do so, it will shake you to your core and put you on your knees. And we don't want that to happen to folks. We want people to be able to be resilient in all that we're facing right now. And so I tell people, give yourself the opportunity to grieve. 2020, we have a new normal. You've heard new normal like to death. We have changed so many of the things that we are doing. Allow yourself to grieve those changes, right? Allow yourself that. Again, set out 15 minutes a day just to do some self-reflection. I always tell people journal. And people think, oh, I have to write like pages and pages, a book, got to do for 30 minutes, just 5 minutes. You would be amazed. Just that little amount of time each day. I tell people tackle problems instead of ignoring them. And what does that mean? That means creating an opportunity to recognize the problem, giving yourself permission to assess the problem, and then accept the things that are out of your control and select the thing that's most empowering and important that you can control to change that particular situation. Okay. Shifting our thinking. Again, I've talked a lot about negative thought process and having a negative outlook. We have to ask ourselves, when we're worrying about particular things, is the fear or the worry realistic? Is this thing going to matter in a week? Is this thing going to matter in 6 months? Is this thing going to matter in a year? Is this a realistic thing for me to be worried about? Is it in my control? Can someone help me with this, right? And then lastly, get support. Oftentimes people don't ask for support. And so it's important for all of us to pay attention to our friends and family and offer the support. Recognize if someone's in a place that's challenging. Talk to them about it. Don't just ignore it and say, well, they'll, figure it out. We have to allow ourselves to receive support, but we also have to be willing to offer that support, because it can be very difficult for people to ask for help. And you might be thinking, well, they're my friend, they're my sister, it's my mother, it's my cousin. If something were wrong, they'd say something to me. Well, a lot of times they're not going to say something. So we have to ask, okay? And number 10, I'm looking at my time here. Get professional help. There is no stigma in seeking professional help to maintain your emotional well-being and your mental health. Oftentimes people feel like, well, if I have to go to a therapist, I'm weak or something's wrong, or I don't want people to, think badly of me. I'm telling you what, I love going to the therapist. That is like my happy time of the week, because I get to talk through and get greater perspective on things. You see all of these things here that a mental health professional can help you do. I tell people, don't wait until you're at stage 4. If you're in the medical profession, stage 4 is what we call the end of the disease continuum. That is where, you're about to die, where treatment is more difficult, is more expensive, often more experimental types of things. Don't wait until code 4. I tell people we want to be preventative. Just like you would take your car to get an oil change, we all as human beings from time to time, we need a checkup from the neck up. And so don't be afraid to engage a mental health professional, a therapist, a counselor. They can help you develop plans and solve problems that you're facing. Don't necessarily have to be, I'm depressed or this. You may just be stuck, right? You may just be in a place where there's stress. You have kids at home. You're trying to virtual learn with them, but maybe you also have an elderly loved one or someone in your home who you're caring for as a caregiver. We have lots of things on our shoulders, and they can help us get stronger in the face of those challenges and changes. Also help us to figure out how we are looking at things, how our perspective may cloud our ability to be well emotionally. This one is incredibly important because it applies to so many of us, healing from the pains of our past. Many of us are carrying around the baggage of trauma of some sort, and we just kind of stuff it. You heard Ericka Badu's bag lady. We out here being the bag lady. And so we need to begin to figure out ways and opportunities to heal from those past pains. And seeking help of a mental health professional can help us with that, help us to pinpoint our goals. If we're like, okay, I'm at a different stage of life. Where do I want to go? Where do I need to go? COVID has changed my perspective, or something else has changed my perspective. And then lastly, to help us to build a better positive sense of self. Okay. And so you might be wondering, well, how do I even start the process of getting connected? I'm going to share two things. One, Mental Health America, our organization has received funding where we are offering pro bono counseling. Pro bono means free 99. If you have been impacted by COVID, whatever that means, we will offer pro bono counseling for adults and youth up to 6 sessions with a licensed mental health professional. And I put my contact information in the chat, I'll put it in there again, and help you get connected to David, who's our intake person for that program. If you don't need pro bono services, but you want to get connected to a therapist, on our website is a list of therapists, mental health practitioners. It will tell you if they take different insurances, if they work with different diagnoses. You can search it by your zip code. It's a really good tool because oftentimes people don't know where to start. And we get a lot of calls to our office, and typically it's people who waited till they're in crisis. And there's nothing worse that when you're in crisis and you go to call someone and they say, that's great, I'll see you in 12 weeks. You really want someone to see you now. And the vast majority of these practitioners are taking new clients. Okay. So we've talked about the 10 tips. Let me give you an additional gem. If you work, if your spouse or your partner works, more than likely you have access to what's called an EAP. That stands for Employee Assistance Program. Even though it's called Employee Assistance Program, if you are a partner or a spouse or a child or sibling of the person who is employed, the EAP will help you too. They can help you get connected to a mental health practitioner. Most EAP plans will, again, give you anywhere from 6 to 10 free visits with a practitioner, which if you're dealing with a time-bound crisis, is a good amount of time to work through that with a professional. I will tell you, I love the EAP. Like, hello, EAP, I need something. If you have a kid that's going to school and they're stressed, if you having a little relationship conflict, if you have lost someone and you're grieving, you can use EAP for all kinds of things. Many plans will have also things like financial management, financial stress. So call and find out your EAP. It's free. It is confidential. Your employer does not know the nature of what you're using it for. They just need to know how many people are using it. I will tell you, EAP is one of the least used benefits of people who are employed and their families. Only about 3.5% of people actually use their EAP benefits. Use it. It's amazing. Okay. Couple of last closing things. Knowing the signs of suicide. These are not all of the signs and symptoms, but just enough so you, as you're with friends and family, or even just with yourself, you want to watch for the signs of crisis or suicide. We don't want to avoid a person who's struggling. We, again, want to offer that support, that opportunity to talk. And if someone does disclose to you that they are thinking about suicide, they may say, yeah, I've thought about going to sleep and not waking up, or I've thought about killing myself, but don't tell anybody. We should never agree to keep someone's suicidal thoughts or plans a secret. We always say to that person, this is something that's serious. I'm concerned about you, and we need to get some other people involved in this in order to keep you safe. And I can talk more about that in my suicide prevention course, but some of the things we want to look for. what the person is communicating. Are they talking about death and dying? Are they threatening suicide? Have they had a previous attempt? Do you see changes in their behavior? And oftentimes people will think, well, they go from being happy to depressed. They go from being happy to crying all the time. But oftentimes the opposite is true as well. If someone's been struggling or constantly stressed or dealing with depression or some other mental health concern, and all of a sudden they're like, ping, and they're happy and they're pep in their step, you're like, good. Medicine's kicked in, therapist is working. Don't make that assumption, because it could be that that person has made the decision. They've gone from thinking about thoughts of suicide to they have a plan and they're ready to carry it out. And because of that, that weight has been lifted off their shoulders, and there's that pep in their step. And so again, behavior changes can go both ways. Thinking, if the person is giving away prized possessions, we have a fellow mental health advocate, suicide awareness advocate, who is a suicide attempt survivor. And when she tells her story, she says she called her aunt. She was at a very low point, and she said, "You can have my shoes." Now, her aunt knew she had shoe game. She's like, "She got shoe game? She's giving me her shoes." Red flag. And she called the police, and the police came to her house, which was great because they were able to take her to behavioral health to get the support. And she did not attempt, and 15, 20 years later, she's alive to tell the story. So if we see people giving away prized possessions, we want to kind of dig into that a little bit. If they are getting the means, however they plan to take their lives, if it's a gun, if it's pills, we want to notice those things. And then lastly, making final arrangements. Does someone know where the deed to the house, the title to the car, how to get to the insurance, the checking account? But also making end-of-life arrangements can be, hey, I need to reconcile this conflict that I've had with someone for a long time. And then again, back to anger and irritability. We know that's a red flag for depression and anxiety. It's also a red flag when we look at suicidality signs and symptoms. So just a few things. At the very bottom, this phone number, the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, put that number in your phone. Write it down real quick, and I'm going to put it in the chat also. This is one of the 20 numbers that I know by heart. I know my grandmother's number, my mother's number, one of my kids' number by heart, but I know the suicide prevention phone number. Please have this, because you never know when you may need to call this with and for someone. It's 24/7, 365. Okay. All right. Sometimes people may not be ready to talk, yourself included. If that's the case, but you're recognizing something's amiss, we have some online screening tools. They're free and confidential and anonymous. There are 11 of them: depression, post-traumatic stress, PTSD, eating disorders, substance use. If you are a parent or grandparent concerned about a young person, or if you are a young person concerned about yourself, you can take the assessments. Now, this is not a replacement for a diagnostic visit with your doctor or a mental health professional, but it will tell you, based on the signs and symptoms that you indicate, this is something that you want to be concerned about, that you need to take further action, and it'll give you some additional feedback on how to do that. But what's also important, and what I like about the assessment, once you take it, you can print it out. And you can take it to your doctor or take it to a mental health practitioner, and it gives you the language to talk about what you're experiencing. Because again, most people are only going to talk about the physical signs and symptoms. It gives you the language to talk about the other things that maybe you're experiencing. So this is a really good tool. You can go to mhascreening.org, or you can just come to our local website as well, or just Google MHA mental health screening. Again, it's free and confidential. All right. And My little clicker stopped going. A couple more resources and then we'll open it up for questions. 211 is the United Way's resource line. If you dial 211, just like you would dial 911 or 311, they can get you connected with a host of resources, not just mental health, but all kinds of things, veterans issues, housing issues, financial issues, childcare, whatever it is, that is a great resource. One of my favorite resources that is online is called Aunt Bertha. And I talk about it, they're like, your Aunt Bertha? I'm like, no, I don't have Aunt Bertha. It's auntbertha.com. They have a website. They also have an app that you can put on your phone, and you just put a zip code in there and it'll give you resources again for any and everything, mental health included as well. I've already talked about the the National Suicide Hotline. We know that in COVID, because people have been isolated, quarantined, stay at home, because people are maybe not working, we are seeing an increase in the amount of domestic violence as well as child abuse. And so I always make sure that people have the domestic violence hotline. If you or someone you know are in a situation where they cannot call, there is also a secure text. If you visit their website, they'll talk about how you access that, or not a secure chat. And then mobile crisis is yes, therapy can be done in additional languages, and I'll talk about that. Mobile crisis is a local service, but it exists in many counties. It's funded by our tax dollars. If you call their number, they are 365 days a year, 24/7. They will dispatch a licensed mental health clinician to your location. They can do a mental health assessment. They can do a suicide assessment. And they can also do, if necessary, what's called an IVC. That means an involuntary commitment, where someone has been deemed to be a harm to themselves or someone else, or has mentally capacitated in a way that they could be a harm to themselves. And so they can expedite that. And then again, we know that we have young people and other people who may not be comfortable on the phone, but texting and messaging. There is a crisis text line. The number you text, just like if you would dial someone's phone number to text, if you would put someone's phone number in to text them, you would put in 741-741. And then you could put whatever, hey, help, MHA, smiley face, a frowny face, whatever. They will respond using their trained crisis counselors, okay? And then lastly, Cardinal Innovations right now is what's called an MCO. They are the managed care organization for Mecklenburg and 19 other counties in North Carolina. So if people are uninsured or having an issue getting connected with mental health practitioner or need additional support, Cardinal is the place to get that assistance. They have an 800 number, but they realized during the crisis, people are not remembering their 800 number, so they have a short dial number. So if you dial **27, it'll also get you connected to Cardinal. In addition to mental health, they do support around substance use issues, and again, what we call IDD, which stands for intellectual disabilities, developmental disability. Okay, so we have covered a lot in our little hour, and I got to open it up to questions. I have mentioned a couple of times that MHA provides training. We do a training called Mental Health First Aid, which is a full day training online. It's virtual, that helps you to become more aware of the signs and symptoms of mental health. You can take the one that helps you look at signs and symptoms for adults, or one that helps you recognize signs and symptoms for youth. Here are some dates that are coming up. These classes are free. We also do QPR, suicide prevention. We have some dates coming up there. The December ones obviously are done with, but there are July and February dates. They're free, but you do have to register on the MHA website. And you'll see that there, and I'll also put it in the chat again for you. So with that, I'm going to conclude my remarks. I'm going to look in the chat to see what other questions. And Tanya, I don't know if you are unmuting people. I know you're going to stop recording so people can ask their questions. So if you want to ask questions, the recording will be stopped, but I'm going to look in the chat real quick.
All right. Thank you so much for all of that wonderful information. I am now stopping the recording.